हेलो एंड वेलकम बैक टू द आवारा मुसाफिर शो। आज हम बात कर रहे हैं एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक के बारे में, एक बहुत ही इंटेंस टॉपिक के बारे में, जिसका नाम है मौत। मौत एक ऐसा शब्द है या एक ऐसा फिनोमेना है जिसे हमने बहुत टैबू बना दिया है, जिसके बारे में हम बात नहीं करना चाहते, जिसके बारे में हम पढ़ना नहीं चाहते। पर क्या आपको पता है, वर्ल्ड में जितने रिलीजन्स हैं ये हमें सिर्फ एक चीज़ सिखाते हैं, वो है हमारी मौत से हमें कैसे डील करना है। तो आज के इस एपिसोड में मैं आपको मिलाने जा रहा हूँ चैतन्य लीला दास जी से, जो इस्कॉन टेम्पल के रेसिडेंट मॉन्क है, टेडेक्स स्पीकर भी है। उन्होंने कई सारे टॉक्स किए हैं स्पिरिचुअल चीज़ों पे। तो आज हम उनसे डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि मौत जो है ये क्या है, और हिंदुइज्म के अकॉर्डिंग ये क्या है सबसे बड़ी बात, और क्या डेथ के बाद हमारी और एक लाइफ होती है। डेथ और रीबर्थ के बीच में क्या जो कनेक्शन है, हम उसे भी सॉल्व करने की कोशिश करते हैं। तो ये एपिसोड एंड तक देखना, सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलना चैनल को। बहुत ही इंटेंस टॉपिक है, डू वॉच इट टिल द एंड। So, hello Chaitanya Das ji. I am so glad that you have come on the show today, क्योंकि मेरी ऑडियंस में ना स्पिरिचुअलिटी को लेके हमेशा एक बहुत बात चलती रहती है। दे इवन आस्क मी अ लॉट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस रिगार्डिंग स्पिरिचुअलिटी, सो आई ट्राई टू ब्रिंग दोज पीपल हु आर एक्सपर्ट्स इन दिस, एंड यू आर समवन जिनसे आई हैव सो मेनी क्वेश्चंस टू आस्क। देयर आर फ्यू क्वेश्चंस जो ऑडियंस ने भी भेजे हैं। सो फर्स्टली वेलकम ऑन द शो।
Thank you so much, Jayesh. It's a great honor and privilege to be on your show this evening. And I don't claim to be a big authority on the subject of spirituality, but definitely, whatever studies have done and whatever has been my experience, I feel it is a good fortune, a big fortune to, share with your audience.
Yeah. I'm really excited for this podcast, क्योंकि recently I started gaining knowledge about Bhagavad Gita. I started learning about Hinduism. So like since past
Really?
1 or 2 years, yeah, I have been reading up on Hinduism, and actually I
Okay.
wanted to learn from where does the concept of Hinduism comes, and that took me on a
Okay.
whole journey. I read
Hmm.
this one line somewhere that karma is not only the actions that you take, but it's your inactions as well. So do you agree with
Correct.
that?
Correct. Yeah, it's both the things. What should we be doing and what should we not be doing? In technical terms, in the language of the Gita, this is typically known as karma and vikarma.
इस वक्त हम बात कर रहे हैं कर्म के बारे में, पर कुछ ही देर में डेथ के ऊपर हम बात करेंगे जो कर्म से रिलेटेड है। तो सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है अगर चैनल को, तो सब्सक्राइब कर दो। इस पूरे कॉन्वर्जेशन को बहुत ध्यान से सुनना, ये बहुत ही डीप कॉन्वर्जेशन है, बहुत ही इंटेंस कॉन्वर्जेशन है। सो मेक श्योर टू सब्सक्राइब एंड कमेंट करके बताना कैसा लगा।
So karma refers to the prescribed activities, the activities that we should be performing. Uh, जैसे हिंदी में उसे पुण्य बोलते हैं, पुण्य कार्य.
Right.
Something
Yeah.
that will fetch us, merits, or something that will fetch us a good standing in the future. And the prohibited activities. That's the
Yeah.
second part that you're talking about, which is known as vikarma, or sinful activities, or papakari जिनको कहते हैं हिंदी में. So that's what is known as vikarma, and how we should be aware of what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. Just like in a exam, to give you a simple example, if a student is taking an exam, so the student has twofold responsibilities. He's expected to write the correct. He's expected, first of all,
Correct.
know the correct answers to the questions that are
Yeah.
before him, and write them in the proper perspective, write them so that it's understandable by the invigilator, by the teacher. And at the same time, there are also some prohibited activities. Chori nahi karni hai.
Correct.
You shouldn't cheat, because that's
Yeah.
going to be detrimental for your future. So yes, definitely, when we talk about karma entails being aware of both our prescribed duties and our prohibited duties.
Yeah.
And so essentially, answering your question.
Yeah.
In that sense.
So, as I told you, I have been reading up on Hinduism, and Hinduism के
Okay.
कुछ certain elements हैं जो बहुत मतलब एक तरह से हम कह सकते हैं कि essentially सबको पता है वो एलिमेंट्स, तो वन ऑफ दोज एलिमेंट इज कर्म. नाउ
Correct.
मुझे ये बहुत टाइम से जानना था कि हिंदुइज्म में एक और कॉन्सेप्ट है विच इज ऑफ रीबर्थ, राइट? We
Correct.
take different forms after our death and we come back, so the whole concept of rebirth basically. So
Correct.
do we, like, you know,
Reincarnation.
yeah, reincarnation, reincarnation, right?
Reincarnation.
um
Correct.
so when like, you know, when for example, if I die someday, that is going to happen, and whenever I take rebirth, um मेरा जो इस बर्थ का कर्मा है, will it pass on to the next birth?
Okay, so I think let's divide the question into two parts.
Yeah.
First is about the science of reincarnation, and the second part is does the karma actually
Correct.
get
Yeah.
carried on, and does it passes on?
Yeah.
So yeah, talking about reincarnation, it's an established fact from the shastras, from the from all different pieces of literatures all over the world, how
Yeah.
we learn that there is a soul within the body. The body is just like a covering, and within the covering there is the presence of the atma. And at the point of death, just like Gita gives the example, that just like you put on a fresh set of clothes in the morning,
Correct.
and you're busy all day and you're traveling, and it gets soiled and sweaty and all that, and towards the end of the day, before you retire for the day,
Yeah.
you have to shed those clothes only to take up another set of fresh clothes the next morning. So something of that sort, that's what Gita explains, that at the end of the life, if you don't mind, I'll quote this beautiful
Yeah, sure.
shlok from the Gita, which says, Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatrana muhyati, which means essentially that dehino asmin yatha dehe, that this deha, this body, is is embodying, is keeping within itself the dehi, or the embodied soul that's there. Dehino asmin yatha dehe, just like the body goes through the phases of kaumara, which is adolescence, or kaumaram, then youth, kaumaram, yauvanam, and then jara. Jara is the old age. Just like the body,
Yeah.
it passes from adolescence to youth to old age. Similarly, tatha deh antara praptir. Similarly, at the point of giving up this body, the soul leaves one body and gets on into the other. And anyone who knows how this phenomena works, anyone who knows how this process of transmigration of the soul works, he is not bewildered by this change. Because
Yeah.
death is something that we find typically, it never gets discussed. In any social gathering, आप किसी ऐसे मैरिज फंक्शन में जा रहे हो, उधर ऐसा लेडीज
Correct.
का संगीत चल रहा है, एंड नाइस भजन्स एंड स्टफ इज गोइंग ऑन, और एक भाभी जी उधर से आती है और सबको बोलते हैं रुको 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 रुको, मैं आप सबको मृत्यु के बारे में कुछ बताना चाहती हूँ. What would you guess? What would be the reaction? Everyone would
Yeah.
just take up their slippers and run after. So
True,
this topic of death never gets discussed, because this is something that people feel, why be so pessimistic?
Correct.
Why discuss something which is so negative? Now the point is, it may appear to be pessimistic, it may appear to be very fearful, but
Yeah.
you fear something when you are ignorant of that. You fear to go on a path which is not lighted up. But when
Correct.
you know the situation, when you know what's it all about, and therefore we find that in all different scriptures, in all different, the past spiritual teachers, they have discussed this subject matter of death in great detail about
Correct.
the transmigration of the soul, how the soul leaves one particular body and gets on to the other. Now, this is from a shastric perspective. This is from a scriptural perspective. Even from a material, experiment perspectives, there have been so many studies that have been
Yeah.
done in regards to reincarnation. Like I'll give you an example. There's a very, very famous researcher. He's professor of psychiatry in the University of Virginia. His name is Dr. Ian Stevenson. You can Google it,
Okay.
Dr. Ian Stevenson. And this person, he has actually conducted and come up with solid case studies of more than 3,000 cases of reincarnation. He also
Oh,
published a
wow.
book, and all of these based on the marks of a small child on the body, based on the past remembrances and the verification of those all of those stuff. And very, very amazing stories, very unbelievable stories, but very much true, and established by facts, that when a small child is mentioning that in my last life, I was a such and such person in this particular place, and now a
Correct.
4-year-old child explaining something about a far off land, about a far off family, the intricate details of it. I mean, everything can't be cooked up, especially
Correct. Correct.
by a small little child. And not just one or two cases, there have been ample case studies in this regard. And even in India, there is a researcher. Her name is Dr. Satwant Pasricha. Maybe you can also research her name,
Yeah.
Google her, Dr. Satwant Pasricha. And she's also very acclaimed authority on the experiments and case studies of reincarnation. So
Hmm.
definitely that's a fact. And just to make it very clear, it's not a matter of whether we believe in something or we don't believe in that.
Yeah.
It's a matter of knowing the truth. I may say that, I don't believe in that the gravitation constant is 9.8 meter per second square.
Yeah.
I may say that, I don't believe, मेरे को विश्वास नहीं है कि ऐसा भी कुछ constant होता है
Correct.
और इसकी value इतनी होती है. No, it's not a matter of, whether I believe or I don't believe. It's a matter of knowing something that is true. And how do we
Correct.
know it? How we put aside our prejudices, how we approach the right kind of books, the right kind of people, and help ourselves get trained in
Hmm.
understanding those realities, like we're speaking about the laws of the land. What are the
Yeah.
laws of the land that are in place. So that's about reincarnation. That's about the rebirth. How the soul definitely, when it gives up one particular body, it carries over to the other body.
Correct.
Now talking about karma, talking about whether the karma gets carried away.
Hmm.
In order to understand that, we need to understand that this body is composed of two coverings. Just like, for example, when we dress up, we have an
Yeah.
inner garment that we put up,
Yeah.
the vest, or the inner garment that's there,
Yeah.
and then the external shirt or the kurta, like I
Correct.
put one. So similarly, the soul also has a subtle covering and a gross covering. So this
Hmm.
gross covering is something that's visible. Gross मतलब जो आप छू सकते हैं,
Correct.
आप feel कर सकते हो. That's the gross covering, which is made up of water, earth, water, fire, air, ether. जो
Right.
पांच material elements हम
Elements.
जानते
Yeah.
हैं. Yeah. So इन पांच elements से जो ये स्थूल शरीर बना होता है, this gross body that's there, that's like the external covering. Now, there is a
Correct.
subtle covering as well. That subtle covering has three components. That subtle covering, Krishna explains in the Gita that Bhumir Apo Nalo Vayu Kham Mano Buddhir Evacha Prakrit Ahankar Itiyam Me Bhinna Prakriti Ashtadha. This, I guess, in the 7th chapter of the Gita, Krishna mentions that the gross body is composed of the five elements: Bhumir, Apo, Nalo, Vayu, and Kham,
Hmm.
earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And
Yeah.
then he mentions about the three subtle elements, the inner covering or the subtle covering of the soul, which
Yeah.
essentially is Man, Buddhi, and Ahankara, which is the mind, the intelligence, and the ego or the identity that the soul carries with itself. So
Yeah.
this karma is something that is carried away by the mind. This karma is something that is at the time of leaving the soul leaves with the subtle covering. वो अपने मन के
Hmm.
साथ, अपने बुद्धि के साथ और अपने आइडेंटिटी के साथ, it leaves the gross body. And along with the subtle covering, man, buddhi or ahankar ke saath, it enters the next body. And therefore,
Hmm.
we find many times when we look at, kids, कुछ बच्चे बचपन से ही वो बहुत ही शरारती होते हैं, and then there
Yeah.
are some kids who are like really silent and very
Correct.
obedient. Now we need to understand, up until now they're just maybe a couple of years old, and they haven't received any kind of formal training from their parents, or that you should be behaving this way or that way. But then how do they behave? What dictates their behavior? That is
Hmm.
what is stored, the impressions that are stored in the mind.
Right.
So that's what the mind carries, the impressions that the mind carries. And this karma is like the bank balance. When you
Hmm.
locate yourself, when you transfer yourself from one city to another, you're
Yeah.
currently staying in Mumbai. If you kind of shift to Chennai, so naturally you take your bank balance along with you. So similarly,
Right.
yes, the karma also moves, and there have been many examples in this regard, that how, again, quoting from the Gita mentions that karmano hi api bodhavyamscha vikarmanah, that how the reactions of our actions, which is karma essentially, how
Yeah.
those positive karmic reactions, जो हमारे पुण्य हैं, अच्छे
Hmm.
अच्छे कार्य के जो meritorious, the good results of our meritorious activities, how and when will they come in our lives, whether in this particular life,
Hmm.
in any of the future lives? That's very difficult to comprehend. That's what the Gita mentions.
Right.
Karmano hi api bodhavyam. Bodhavyam refers to, it's very difficult to understand. And similarly, vikarmanascha bodhavyam. It's also difficult to perceive how the sinful reactions to our prohibited activities will manifest in the future. Will they manifest
Right.
immediately, or will they manifest after a period of time? Just like, to give a very simple example, I know that you won't be doing this, but if you're walking down the road, and you tease a young girl, so
Hmm.
then there is an instant reaction
Yeah.
that you receive. Correct,
Yeah.
correct. That's an instant reaction. But then sometimes, you know, someone may just stab someone from behind and may
Hmm.
be successful and just walking away,
Yeah.
and he's very much sure that no one saw me. But then there's a case, and there's a whole
Right.
the crime branch and stuff. They get behind you, and they uh, look for all the evidences and everything, and many years later they nab the culprit, and there is the punishment. So yes,
Correct.
sometimes there is the instant reaction that we get for our activities, and sometimes the reaction is a prolonged one, जो
Hmm.
काफी दिन के बाद आते हैं, और काफी जन्मों के बाद भी आ सकते हैं. In Mahabharata, we find the example of Dhritarashtra,
Yeah.
who is the um, kind of the blind king of Hastinapur,
Correct.
but because he's not capable of ruling, so therefore there is this confusion, and therefore there's this war, and
War. Yeah.
it said that Dhritarashtra, he has to bear the suffering of seeing his 100 sons getting killed. Now,
Hmm.
for a parent to see his, offsprings
Yeah.
getting killed, I mean, that's a great pain. That's a great pain. And what to talk of
Correct.
seeing 100 of his sons getting killed, the Kauravas getting killed in the Battle of Kurukshetra.
Yeah.
Now it's explained that why did Dhritarashtra, he had to bear this entire pain, because it is said that 100 lifetimes ago he had killed 100 offsprings of a bird, and therefore that karma was pending for him. He had to bear those karma. But then
Yeah.
in order to have 100 sons, he didn't have enough pious credits, or he didn't have
Hmm.
enough merit to his personality, that he could have 100 sons in the first place. And therefore he
Yeah.
had to take all of these 100 birds, so that he does some good activities, and he accumulates those
Oh wow.
pious
Yeah.
reactions, and that's how he gets 100 sons. And then that reaction that was
Yeah.
pending since a long time, he has to bear that reaction. So yes, karma is something. It is said that the laws of karma, they are very difficult to comprehend. I typically
Hmm.
give the example of a mixer or grinder. हम लोग सब घर पे मिक्सर ग्राइंडर यूज करते हो
Correct.
आप भी देखा होगा.
हाँ.
Even if you don't be using it, very much in the kitchen, it's a part of
Yeah.
every kitchen household. Or in a typical mixer grinder, there are these speed levels.
Yeah.
एक पे
Correct.
रहता है, दो पे रहता है, तो एक पे जब ही रहता है तो वो धीरे धीरे चलता है.
Hmm.
गन 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 एंड देन
Yeah.
दो पे जाते और फिर
Yeah.
तीन पे, चार पे, और पांचवें पे एकदम
Correct.
something of that sort.
Yeah.
And we know that the higher the speed, the finer the powder or
Correct.
the mixer would be coming in. लेकिन तो स्पीड जितनी ज्यादा होती है वो सब्सटेंस उतना ही फाइन आता है. But
Right.
the laws of karma, they are very, very different. It is said that the kala chakra or the karmic reactions,
Hmm.
they move in a very, very subtle ways. It's not visible even. हमें समझ नहीं
Okay.
आता है ये कैसे चल रहा है.
Right.
How time is moving and how these reactions of punya and pap, the good
Yeah.
reactions and the
Yeah.
bad reactions, they are going to come. But then it's just so precise. It's said that the laws of nature, they grind very slow, but they grind very fine.
Hmm.
Matlab, I mean, that's the kind of perfection that's instituted in the
Yeah.
creation. कि we may come up with something, and there might be 100 flaws in it, but then the
Correct.
way that the creation has been designed, the way that the creation has been put into place, is that the laws of creation, they just function just too efficient,
Hmm.
मतलब कभी
Right.
हम ये नहीं देंगे अरे आज क्या हो गया, 7 बज गए, 8 बज गए, धूप क्यों नहीं होगा है, आज
Yeah.
सूर्य देव थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा रेस्ट ले रहे क्या.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen that way. Doesn't happen
Right.
that way. We may speed up the speed limit and escape a few cameras on the highway, and even those cameras may fail to detect the number plate and anything.
Yeah.
So these man-made rules are many times subject to defects or deficiencies, but then the laws of nature, they are just so perfect. They are just so
Correct.
perfect that it behooves us to know the nature of those laws, and just abide by them for our
Yeah.
welfare. It's not a matter of being paranoid or being too
Yeah.
fearful about these laws, but then for our betterment, we should definitely be knowing how these laws of karma work, and how is it that we can act in the best possible
Yeah.
manner
Yeah.
to fetch the best future for ourselves.
Yeah, makes sense. And you talked about death in between, and death is something like you were saying that death is not discussed in Indian societies, and death is something which is like really fascinating for me because so my grandfather passed away when I was really young, so I didn't understand
Uh-huh.
what was happening. But recently, like last year in December, my grandmother passed away, and this time
Mhm.
I understood everything about death. Like I could see what's happening, all the rituals
Correct.
and the whole emotional side of the family. So that's where my interest in death peaked. And I have just one question. Like I have been trying to find the answer of this thing, so like everywhere, like rightly mentioned that we take rebirth, but what happens between that time when you have like your soul has passed from this body and it has not taken birth in some other form? So in that time,
Correct.
what happens with
Correct.
the soul? Does it meets the god, or it's just floating around in the vacuum which universe is?
Yeah, that's a very pertinent question, and it's very important for us to understand. And answer to this particular question helps us understand many of the rituals that are in place. जैसा हम
Hmm.
श्राद्ध के बारे में हम सुनते हैं,
Yeah.
और the last rites that all of us have heard about. But many times again we find that many times we miss the meaning behind those
Correct.
practices. So yes, definitely, answer to this particular question is a very, very important one. This is a very important question. And so the understanding goes this way, that, while the soul is within the body, now we need to understand that, the soul in itself is not capable of fulfilling, its desires to enjoy. हमें कुछ
Yeah.
देखनी चीजें देखनी होती है, हम देख कर एंजॉय करते हैं, या हम कुछ खा कर एंजॉय करते हैं. We smell something, we touch something. So we
Correct.
need these senses to facilitate the enjoyment of the soul. So
Hmm.
essentially, the body is like a facility that has been helping the soul to fulfill its desires. अगर गुलाब
Right.
जामुन खाना है तो गुलाब जामुन को अगर चखना है, जीभ नहीं रहेगी, कैसे चखेंगे गुलाब जामुन,
Correct.
right? And similarly, if you love the fragrance of a rose,
Hmm.
we need this facility to experience,
Yeah.
that beautiful part of the creation. So this body has been a facility and has been assisting the soul to enjoy in different ways and means all through his life. Now,
Hmm.
at the time of death, there is a demand. There is a demand from the living being, the soul, the Jivatma,
Yeah.
to relinquish this facility. And it's not so easy. Something that's been helping you remain comfortable, that's been helping you remain very happy in this world. And if someone
Yeah.
just asks, now you ought to give it up. So that's a very difficult proposition. That's a very difficult proposal before the soul. And the soul typically doesn't want to. And therefore, it's said that, a lot of pain is inflicted
Yeah.
to the body at the time of death, so that just out of that pain, the soul agrees to leave the body. But then,
Hmm.
even after leaving the body is, as long as the body is still present, the soul tries its level best to once again gain hold
Oh
of,
wow.
gain control of the body.
Yeah.
And therefore, you'll find in all different traditions, either the body is supposed to be burnt or buried,
Yeah.
or like in, I guess, the Parsis, they
Yeah. They hang
put
it
it
up.
off from a cliff, yeah,
Yeah.
so that it's like, destroyed by the scavengers, like
Correct.
that. So by one way or the other, in all different traditions, there is a need for the body to be no longer be present.
Hmm.
And the reason for this is that, so that the soul agrees to keep moving ahead on its
Yeah.
journey. And to help it keep moving ahead, it's the responsibility of the offsprings, or the unke jo
Correct.
dependents rahe hain, or people who have been taking care of them. It's their
Yeah.
responsibility to pray to the higher authorities to direct that soul
Yeah.
on its journey ahead. And until those prayers are properly carried out, if those prayers are not properly carried out, the
Hmm.
soul still remains without a gross body. And typically, this is what is the identity of a ghost that we understand.
Yeah.
So again, people, there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of discussion ki aise ghost, do they really exist, yeah, nahi,
Yeah.
and typically, people, they speak based on their experiences. Now
Correct.
it's not true that, it doesn't make sense that we accept only those truths that we actually experience. you
Hmm.
know we need not go through an experience to understand the truth. जिस तरह से
Right.
एग्जाम के समय बोला जाता है कि अगर आप चीटिंग करोगे, तो आपको, you will be your answer sheet will be taken off, and you'll have to give a,
Yeah.
your whole year will be gone practically. so
Correct.
so you know so if a foolish student, if he feels कि अरे किसने देखा, ऐसा होता है कि नहीं होता है, so
Yeah.
learning from experiences, वो बोलते हैं कि what's that beautiful quote which says that experience is not the best teacher, but a
Hmm.
fool understands by no other way. So
Yeah.
similarly, it's not that we understand ki whether I've experienced the presence of some ghost or something or not.
Correct.
It's a matter of, again, knowing the truth, knowing
Hmm.
and understanding from people who know,
Yeah.
understanding from the bona fide books, understanding from the proper sources, essentially the authorities that are
Yeah.
in place. So yeah, to continue our discussion. So when this soul is without a body, and proper prayers are offered by the dependents, and that's when the higher authorities, they take charge of the soul,
Yeah.
and they train him for the next body. And that training typically goes on for a certain duration. And even during those durations, the offsprings or the dependents, they are meant to continue their prayers. Principally speaking, the prayers are meant to be continued for a certain amount of
Okay.
time. I mean, that could vary. I'm not very much sure about how it happens in the different traditions and different
Hmm.
places all over the world. But the principle very much is applicable everywhere. And the same principle is very much in church. They pray before Jesus and they have their prayer meetings and everything. Whereas
Right.
in Hinduism, they have the Shraddha ceremony. And I'm
Yeah.
very much sure that even in other cultures, they do have these practices very much
Correct.
in
Correct.
place. And that's when the soul actually gets into another body with its
Hmm.
mind, the impressions, the intelligence, and also the identity. We're discussing about the small child. Kabhi kabhi
Right.
bache, they're very sharp from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And some kids, they're just dull. I mean, आप उनको कितना भी कुछ भी बताओ, it takes time for them to
Correct.
understand and grasp things. But then there are some kids who have a very very sharp intelligence in place. They hear something and they remember it. And like for the mathematics tables, कुछ बच्चों को एकदम ऐसा,
Hmm.
आप 13 के टेबल बोलो, 17 का
Yeah.
टेबल बोलो, एकदम ऐसा, this at the tip of the tongue.
Correct.
And then some kids really have a very very tough time. So
Hmm.
it's all a matter of their subtle covering, their degree of intelligence that they have, the impressions that they have, that they carry, that sort.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, मैंने आपको ये पूछा because when my grandmother passed away, उस time पे like वो
Yeah,
13 या 14 days के लिए जो एक वो period होता है when सब rituals होते हैं,
correct,
all the family members
correct,
come. तो
correct.
this was the first night after my grandmother passed away. And
Uh-huh.
Hinduism में शायद ऐसा होता है ना कि like the son has to sleep without a mattress or anything in the
Correct,
like
correct.
place where she passed away. So
Yeah.
my father was sleeping there. So to give him company, I
Mm-hmm.
was also sleeping with him. And
Yeah.
at like 3 a.m. in the night, I heard noises in the kitchen. Okay, and I
Yeah.
went and I saw there's no one, पर बर्तन का आवाज आ रहा था. तो आई थॉट मे
Correct,
बी किसी
correct.
ने रखा होगा कुछ गलत मतलब तरीके से, तो इट माइट हैव फॉलन और समथिंग.
Yeah.
सो आई केम बैक एंड
Yeah.
स्लेप्ट.
Yeah.
देन द नॉइज केम अगेन. I went
Yeah.
and I saw there was this डब्बा and उसका जो जो टॉप पे होता है like the ढक्कन उसका जो होता है, it was open.
Yeah. It's
And
open.
that scared me, like it really scared me because
Yeah.
since my
Yeah.
childhood I have believed in like the concept of ghost, soul and everything.
Correct. Correct.
So I
Correct.
thought something weird is happening. The next day I told my mother this thing, and my mother pointed this out ki my grandmother had diabetes, okay, and she used to get up at night.
Mm.
उनको नींद नहीं आती थी, तो she used to be like up all night almost. And
Mm.
around like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., she used to go into the kitchen and eat something. And that has
Yeah.
stayed with me till date, and I cannot forget what has like that
Yeah.
that night, that one night. And
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
death really fascinates me. What happens after death to the soul, that
Correct.
fascinates me.
Yeah.
So that
And
was
and
that
and
was
that's
one
the
experience.
reason, yeah, that's really, very, very, could be fearful. But then, like
Yeah.
Gita says, Dhiras tatra na muhyati. So Dhira means a person who is situated in knowledge, a person who
Hmm.
knows how things happen in this world. And muhyati means bewilderment. A person who knows how things go about in this world is not bewildered by experiencing the changes of this world. I'll share a small experience of one of my friends that
Yeah.
this friend of mine, he also had lost one of his relatives. And due to some circumstance, he had to stay in that house all alone, because after the cremation of the body and everything,
Yeah.
maybe another friend of his, just the two of them were staying that night, and the other people were to come the next morning. And like you mentioned, some experience of yours, and this friend of mine also experienced that, something quote unquote weird is happening,
Yeah.
and those ऐसे पर्दे लहरा रहे हैं and strong winds and stuff, all those
Yeah.
stuff that we see in the movies. But then this friend of mine, he was because he knew that that's how the phenomena works. That's how the soul actually is looking for the body and is very much
Yeah.
attached. It's a matter of attachment यार. मतलब आप सोचो, अगर आपने अपनी गाड़ी कहीं पार्क की है and someone just tows away that vehicle, and it doesn't mark the place कि कहाँ पे वो लेके गए हैं, won't
Yeah.
you be looking for that vehicle? I mean, how
Correct.
desperate would you be? How desperate would
Correct.
you be? अरे अभी तो यहाँ पे गाड़ी थी, कौन लेके गया, ऐसे कैसे कोई लेके जा सकता है?
Yeah.
And you keep asking a number of people and you keep visiting the nearby वो traffic वाले के पास में and all those. So similarly, the soul also is very much desperate. Where's that facility of mind that had been helping me fulfill my desires all through
Right.
all of this in the past. So this friend of mine, he just stood up very boldly, he put on the lights, and he started addressing to no one visible, and he
Yeah.
started addressing with a bold heart and praying that look, your tenure here in this setup in this house has now finished, and there is a journey awaiting for you, there is a future awaiting for you, a very brilliant future awaiting for you, and this change is something that is irreversible, and
Yeah.
therefore if you can accept this change and keep moving ahead, this will be beneficial for all of you, and this will also be beneficial for all of us here, because
Right.
this is something that is very much a fact, that what you are desiring now, it's not going to happen. And
Correct.
therefore with this strong fervent prayers, and he chanted the names of the Lord, and and that's how the whole thing kind of
Wow.
disappeared.
Yeah.
So, this another very, very bold and beautiful example, we should say. I don't know how
Right.
many of us will be able to actually do it, but then, we do
Yeah.
have a beautiful example in place here.
Yeah. And it just hit me like Hinduism में they say कि attachment is the only thing which you shouldn't be having in your life. So ये जो आपने अभी explain किया कि soul is so attached to the body. So is this the reason why
Correct.
ऐसा बोलते हैं? And when you also take up monkhood, monk lifestyle, at that time
Correct.
you are taught to like get away from all the attachment. So is this the reason?
Uh, Talking about attachment, we need to understand attachment in the right perspective. What is
Hmm.
attachment actually? See, attachment is nothing but, liking something, liking some of your experience of the past. है ना, अभी
Yeah.
अभी
Yeah.
आपको अगर if you have been eating at say uh, what's that, maybe Bikaner walas, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have been eating this samosa, and
Yeah.
then repeatedly you have been going there and having that particular samosa.
Correct.
So you tend to get attached to it कि अरे नहीं,
Hmm.
समोसा अगर खाना है ना, तो वो उधर हीरानंदानी में
Yeah.
20th सेक्टर के वो चौराहे पे जो वो छोटा सा बीकानेर वाला है ना,
Correct.
उसका समोसा खाओ, and that's really out of the world, man. I
Yeah.
mean, so that's what attachment is all about. Now, so the desires, it's not possible to control it's not possible to just nullify the desires, because
Hmm.
it's just natural. It's said that desires are just like a waterfall coming from the cliff of
Yeah.
the mind. ये मन में
True.
इतने इम्प्रेशंस हैं पास्ट लाइफ्स के और प्रेजेंट लाइफ्स के, और इतने सारे अनुभूतियां हैं, the experiences that are there, and
Yeah.
definitely whenever we come before something, the desires are going to be there. Now,
Hmm.
what are we attached to? That's something where we need to put in our intelligence,
Right.
because there are some things which are congenial for us, which are
Correct.
beneficial for us, and then there are some things which are detrimental for us. For example, आप अगर ये गोलगप्पे खाते हो, right? So
Yeah.
so ठीक है, eating 4 is fine, eating say even 10 is fine, say eating even 25 20-25 is also fine.
Yeah.
Lekin one fine day, if you just go out there and you end up having 150 golgappas, and
Yeah.
that tikhi chutney and that
Yeah.
uska wo pani and everything,
Correct.
what's going to be the result? What's going to be the
Hmm.
result? Be knowing, what's beneficial for us in what
Right.
quantity, and what is it? What is it that's going to have a
Yeah.
temporary, what's going to give me a temporary pleasure, and what is it that is going to give me a sustained, pleasure. Say for
Hmm.
example, when you work out in a gym, the when you work out in a gym, you sweat, and you have all these, it's really a tough task, but then
Yeah.
that this is something that's going to help me in the long run.
Correct.
at the
Correct.
same time if we just don't do any exercise, we just end up sleeping maybe 4 hours additionally, and we don't have a
Hmm.
habit of getting up early in the morning, and things that way. So we may be getting some extra rest, which may be definitely required at times.
Yeah.
But then if that's got into a habit कि ठीक है यार, अभी तो लॉकडाउन चल रहा है, अपने को तो
Yeah.
ऑफिस के लिए लॉग इन 11 बजे करना है, तो
Correct.
11 बजे, आई मीन आई सी द किड्स, द स्कूल किड्स, माय गॉड, दे हैव रियली बीन रॉयली ruined. पहले
Yeah.
तो आठ
Yeah.
बजे का स्कूल होता था, दे वर बाउंड टू गेट अप एट 5:30, 6 o'clock,
Correct.
freshen them up and then get ready for school, wait for the school bus, जाने में टाइम, स्कूल में पहले.
Yeah.
तो मतलब अभी तो बच्चे, आई मीन 8 बजे का क्लास है, पौने 8 बजे, quarter to 8, the
Right.
mother is having a tough time just waking all those
Correct.
kids.
Correct.
And so yeah, so speaking about the principle, we may feel that some extra sleep is helpful for me, but
Hmm.
then what's the quantity? So what is it? What are those activities, or what are those desires that we should be attached to, and what is it that we shouldn't be attached to, which may
Right.
disappoint us in the future? Say for example,
Yeah.
if someone is very much attached to his, maybe say,
Hmm.
school हम सबको अच्छा लगता है, all of us very fondly remember our school days, but then
Yeah.
we know that time is moving ahead. When we are in 7th standard, we move on to the 8th, then the 9th,
Yeah.
then the 10th, and then there is bound to be the farewell function. we
Correct.
we we There is going to be a time that we'll have a last look at the
Yeah.
school, and maybe tears rolling down and remembering all those
Yeah.
beautiful happy moments we had at the school. But then just remaining attached doesn't make sense, and
Hmm.
therefore our responsibility is to keep looking ahead. Our
Correct.
responsibility is to look out for the future road, the road ahead, basically.
Yeah.
So therefore, attachment is something that is given a negative connotation. The wrong sense of attachment is something which will keep uh, kind of pulling us from growing ahead, which will keep
Hmm.
binding us and not
Right.
allow us to explore more, not allow us to grow more, not allow us to experience the much better
Correct.
realities, or the much better fortune that may be in store for us. If someone
Yeah.
is very much attached to a school, अरे नहीं मेरे को आगे पढ़ना ही नहीं है, ये मेरे जो school days थे, they were best, and you know and doesn't want to go to college and take up a job. I mean, such a person is good luck to such a person,
Correct.
essentially. So yeah. So summing it all up, attachment in itself is not good or bad. What are we attached to, and in what quantity are we attached to?
Hmm.
That is what matters the most.
तो आज द आवारा मुसाफिर शो पे हमने जाना मौत क्या होती है, मौत का स्पिरिचुअल कनेक्शन क्या है, मौत के बाद क्या होता है, हमारी आत्मा या हमारा जो सोल है वो कहाँ जाता है, वो क्या करता है, उसे हमारी बॉडी से इतना अटैचमेंट क्यों है। आज हमने ये सब जाना। ये पार्ट 1 था इस एपिसोड का। पार्ट 2 में हम बात करने वाले हैं भगवत गीता के बारे में, मॉन्क कैसे बना जाता है उस बारे में, मॉन्क क्यों बना जाता है उस बारे में, और गॉड क्या है, भगवान क्या है, अल्लाह, जीसस, ये जो हम टर्म्स यूज़ करते हैं गॉड को डिस्क्राइब करने के लिए, कृष्णा जैसे हो गए, विष्णु है, शिवा है। तो हमने चैतन्य जी से ये बात की कि इतने सारे गॉड्स क्यों है और गॉड क्या होता है। तो अगर आपको ये एपिसोड पसंद आया तो सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलना, कमेंट करना मत भूलना, क्योंकि कमेंट्स देख के हमें पता चलता है कि आपको किस तरह के एपिसोड्स पसंद आ रहे हैं. सो या दिस वाज द पार्ट 1. आई होप सो यू ऑल एंजॉयड दिस.
जो सुप्रीम की अंडरस्टैंडिंग है या जो भगवान की अंडरस्टैंडिंग है,
Yeah.
ये कभी हमारे अनुभवों पे, it should never be based on our experiences, because experiences are bound to change. अगर कोई कहता अरे मैंने जब भी इनसे मांगा, जो भी मांगा, जितना मांगा सब कुछ मिला, अरे कल को मांगेंगे नहीं मिलेगा, तो will our understanding be different? No, it shouldn't be that way, and therefore our concepts should be based on proper knowledge.